My name is Violet Hayes. I am 31 years old. The day my boss, David Donovan, presented my entire pipeline optimization proposal as his own brainchild in front of the entire executive team 11 months ago, while my coworkers Stella Ellis and Julian Hayes chuckled and whispered that I was just there to take notes, shattered any illusion I had about fair play in this company. That betrayal was the latest in a string of quiet sabotages where they stole my ideas and spread rumors that I lacked the experience to handle real energy sector challenges. Now, in the packed boardroom of our Tulsa headquarters during this emergency all-hands strategy session, I could feel the same knives sharpening as my boss prepared to announce a major restructuring that would publicly pin recent project failures on me. But this time, I had proof of my true role in the company, and I was done being their scapegoat. If you have ever watched your boss and team take credit for your blood, sweat, and tears, only to throw you under the bus when things went south, drop a comment below and tell me what the moment felt like for you. I read every single one, and it helps knowing I am not alone in this kind of workplace nightmare. I sat in the back row of that boardroom, trying to keep my breathing steady. My boss, David Donovan, stood at the front in his usual crisp navy suit. My coworkers filled the chairs around me, their laptops open, but their eyes flicking toward me with that familiar mix of pity and amusement. Stella Ellis leaned over to Julian Hayes and muttered something I could not quite hear, but the way her lips curled told me it was not kind. Aurora Morgan and Leo Blake were already tapping away on their phones. Even Violet Scott kept glancing my way, like she was waiting for the show to start. My boss cleared his throat and clicked to the first slide. Team, we have a serious issue with the Oklahoma expansion pipeline. Delays are costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars in overruns, and I have traced the root cause back to poor coordination on the ground level. His gaze landed straight on me. Violet, care to explain why your section of the data analysis came in so late and so full of errors that it threw the whole timeline off? The room went still. I felt heat rush up my neck. 4 weeks earlier, I had stayed until midnight for 3 straight nights, perfecting that analysis, only to have my boss email me at the last minute, demanding I hand everything over to Stella for a final polish. Now, here he was, turning it into my failure in front of 60 people. I opened my mouth to answer, but he did not wait. See, this is exactly what I have been saying in our leadership meetings. He continued, his voice smooth and cutting at the same time. Some people just are not cut out for the pressure of this industry. They smile and nod in the meetings, but when it counts, they drop the ball. Violet has been with us for 2 years now, and honestly, I am starting to wonder if we made a mistake bringing her on board in the first place. Stella let out a soft laugh she tried to disguise as a cough. Julian nodded vigorously. My stomach twisted. I had built this company from nothing 6 years ago, pouring every dollar I had into the holding company that quietly acquired the majority stake in this energy firm. I had chosen to work undercover as a mid-level analyst, so I could see how things really ran from the inside without everyone kissing up to the owner. It had worked too well. They treated me like the office joke, and now my boss was using that to cover his own mismanagement. Mason Ford. My one real ally in the building shifted in his seat 2 rows ahead of me. He had been the only one who ever pulled me aside after meetings to say my ideas were solid. But even he stayed quiet right now. The tension in the room thickened. My boss kept going, each word sharper than the last. Effective immediately, we are reassigning the pipeline oversight to Aurora and Leo. Violet, you will move to basic reporting duties under Stella. And let me be clear, if we see any more delays, I will have no choice but to recommend we part ways. This is a performance issue, plain and simple. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Clara Kensington, from Human Resources, sat near the door taking notes with a neutral face. I caught the quick glance she shot me. It was calculation, not sympathy. Gregory Vance, the senior vice president, leaned back with a small smirk. I sat there feeling every eye on me, the weight of their judgment pressing down. My hands trembled under the table. This was not just a demotion. This was the beginning of them erasing me completely. I had the documents on my laptop right there in my bag, the ownership papers that proved I could end this with one phone call to my lawyers. But something held me back. If I revealed myself now, it would look like desperation. I needed to wait for the right moment. The meeting dragged on for another 40 minutes while my boss outlined the new structure that conveniently put all the credit paths through his favorites. Every time someone asked a question about the delays, he circled back to my section like it was the punchline of a joke only they understood. By the time he dismissed everyone, I could barely feel my legs. I stood up slowly, gathered my things, and headed for the door. Mason caught up to me in the hallway. "Violet, that was brutal," he said under his breath. "You okay?" "I know that analysis was flawless before they took it from you." I forced a tight smile. "I will be fine." "Thanks, Mason." But I was not fine. I walked straight to the small break room on the third floor and locked myself in the single stall. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was the same pattern that had been building for 2 years. My boss stealing credit, the team gossiping behind my back, the slow erosion of my reputation until I looked like the weakest link. I had let it happen because I wanted to learn the business the hard way, the way no owner ever gets to see. Now it was biting me harder than I ever imagined. When I finally stepped out, Stella was waiting by the coffee machine. She did not even pretend to be nice. "Tough break in there," she said, stirring her cup with slow circles. "My boss is just under a lot of pressure from the board. Maybe if you step back and let the rest of us handle the big stuff, it would be better for everyone. No hard feelings, right?" Her words landed like a slap. I wanted to tell her the truth right then, that I could buy and sell this entire operation 10 times over. Instead, I nodded once and walked away, before I said something I could not take back. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of menial tasks. I was already being given the grunt work updating spreadsheets that anyone could have handled. Julian stopped by my desk once to drop off a stack of files. "My boss wants these cross-checked by end of day," he said without looking at me. "Try not to mess it up this time." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. By 5 o'clock, the office was emptying out, but I stayed late staring at the ownership documents on my encrypted drive. I had built this company from a single struggling drilling operation 6 years ago. Every decision, every risk, every late night had been mine. My boss was only here because I had hired him to be the public face while I observed from the shadows. Now those shadows were closing in. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "Heard my boss talking to Gregory in the hall after the meeting. They are already drafting your performance improvement plan. Watch your back." I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a second. This was escalating faster than I expected. The public humiliation in the meeting had been the spark, but the real fire was just starting. I closed my laptop and headed for the parking garage, the echo of my footsteps loud in the empty hallway. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for sure. I could not keep playing the quiet observer forever. The next morning, the atmosphere in the office felt even heavier. People avoided my desk like I had some kind of contagious failure. Clara from Human Resources scheduled a surprise one-on-one with me for 10 o'clock. When I walked into her office, she had my personnel file open on her desk and a polite but distant smile on her face. "Violet, after yesterday's meeting, my boss asked me to document some concerns," she said, sliding a form across to me. "It is standard procedure, but I need you to sign off on the action plan." I scanned the document. It listed every minor thing they could twist into evidence against me, from missed deadlines that were not mine to poor team collaboration that was code for not sucking up to the right people. My blood ran hot. This was not standard. This was the beginning of a paper trail that would make it easy to push me out. I signed it anyway because fighting it now would only make me look defensive. But inside, I was calculating. I had the power to fire every single one of them with a single board resolution. The question was whether I could do it without destroying the company I had sacrificed so much to build. By lunch, the gossip had spread. I overheard Aurora and Violet Scott in the break room talking about how some people just cannot handle the pace, and how my boss was finally doing what needed to be done. Leo Blake even had the nerve to forward me an email thread where they were already dividing up my old responsibilities. Each new jab felt like another brick in the wall they were building around me. Mason found me in the cafeteria later and slid into the seat across from me. "This is getting out of hand," he said quietly. "I tried talking to my boss this morning and he shut me down hard. Said you were a liability and that the team was better off without the drama. I do not know what is really going on with you, Violet, but if you need an ally, I am here." His words were the first kind thing I had heard all day, but they also confirmed how isolated I had become. The reputation destruction was working exactly as my boss planned. My name was becoming synonymous with failure, and the company I secretly owned was slipping further from my control with every whispered rumor. I thanked Mason and went back to my desk, but the weight in my chest would not lift. I opened my laptop and stared at the folder labeled Ownership Protocols. One click, and I could call an emergency board meeting. One click, and I could end this. But ending it meant stepping out of the shadows I had chosen, and I was not sure what that would cost me yet. That afternoon, my boss called another unscheduled team huddle this time, just our small group. He stood at the head of the conference table and looked straight at me again. "Violet, effective tomorrow, your access to the main project servers will be limited to read-only. We cannot risk any more errors on the pipeline data. Stella will take point from here." The room was silent, except for the soft tap of Stella's pen on her notepad. I felt the ground shift under me. This was not just a demotion anymore. This was them cutting me out of the heart of the company I had created. My mind raced with the knowledge that I could stop it all, but the words stuck in my throat. If I revealed everything now, it would look like I had been lying to them for years. The trust would shatter either way. I nodded once, keeping my face neutral, even though my heart was hammering. Understood. But inside, I was screaming. The public exposure had begun, and the collapse was picking up speed faster than I could control. I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The huddle broke up, and everyone filed out without a word to me. My boss lingered by the conference table, stacking his papers with deliberate slowness. He did not look at me until the room was empty, except for the two of us. Then he finally spoke, his voice low and edged with that same false concern he always used right before he twisted the knife. "Violet, I hope you understand this is for the good of the team," he said, sliding one last sheet across the table toward me. "We cannot afford any more slip-ups on this pipeline. The board is breathing down my neck for results, and quite frankly, your recent performance is making my job harder than it needs to be." I stared at the new form in front of me. It was an updated performance improvement plan, this one with even tighter deadlines and a warning that failure to meet them would trigger formal disciplinary action. The words blurred for a second. 3 years I had watched this company grow under my quiet direction, and now the man I had handpicked to run it publicly was treating me like dead weight. I wanted to slam the paper down and tell him everything right there, but the thought of the chaos it would unleash stopped me cold. Instead, I folded it neatly and slipped it into my folder. "Understood," I said, keeping my tone even. My voice did not shake, but inside I felt something harden, like steel cooling after a forge. My boss gave me a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "Good. And Violet, one more thing. I would appreciate it if you kept any personal frustrations to yourself. The team has noticed your attitude lately, and it is starting to affect morale." He walked out without waiting for a reply, leaving me standing there with the echo of his footsteps. Attitude. The word burned. I had spent months biting my tongue, while he and the others took credit for my strategies, and now my silence was being weaponized against me. The next few days blurred into a nightmare of small, calculated cuts. Stella took over the morning briefings, presenting data I had compiled the night before, as if she had pulled it from thin air. When Julian asked a question about the cost projections, she answered smoothly, glancing my way, with a little smirk that said she knew exactly whose work she was borrowing. Aurora and Leo stopped including me on the shared drive, all together, routing everything through my boss instead. Even Violet Scott, who had once asked me for help on a minor report, now walked past my desk like I was invisible. Mason tried to run interference. He caught me in the copy room on Wednesday afternoon and closed the door behind him. "This is getting ridiculous," he said, voice low. "I overheard my boss telling Gregory Vance that you are the reason the Oklahoma expansion is stalling. He is building a case, Violet. You need to document everything." I nodded, grateful for the one person who still saw through the fog. "I am Mason, but there is more to this than you know." He raised an eyebrow, but did not push. "Just be careful. Clara from Human Resources has been pulled into 3 meetings this week about you. It does not look good." That same afternoon, Clara called me into her office again. She had another stack of forms ready this time, requesting I acknowledge receipt of a formal warning about team dynamics. Her tone was professional, almost robotic, but I caught the way her eyes flicked to her computer screen, where an email from my boss was still open. She was documenting every step exactly as he directed. "My boss feels it is best to get this on record early," she said, sliding the papers toward me. "He mentioned you have been resistant to feedback. Is there anything you want to add before you sign?" I signed without comment, but my mind was racing. Resistant to feedback. The phrase was laughable, coming from the man who had never once asked for my real input. As I left her office, I felt the walls closing in tighter. The reputation destruction was no longer whispers in the break room. It was official paperwork, now the kind that could follow me if I ever tried to leave on my own terms. By Friday, the pressure had ratcheted up another notch. My boss scheduled a surprise client call with the Oklahoma energy regulators and made sure I was the only one not invited to the conference room. I watched through the glass wall as Stella and Julian sat at the table, laughing at something my boss said their laptops opened to slides I had created 6 months earlier. When the meeting ended, my boss walked out, first clapping Leo on the back, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "Excellent insights today, team," he announced. That pivot on the regulatory language was exactly what we needed. Keep that energy going. The pivot had been my idea, typed up in a late-night memo I had sent him privately 2 weeks ago. He had never replied. Now it was their victory. I sat at my desk, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks, while the rest of the department congratulated each other like they had just won a championship. Mason caught my eye from across the open floor and gave a small, helpless shrug. That evening, I stayed late again, alone in the quiet office, pulling up the encrypted ownership files on my laptop. The holding company papers were clear as day. I had majority control. I could call an emergency board meeting and remove my boss with one resolution. The temptation was so strong, my finger hovered over the call button on my phone. But then I thought about the employees who had nothing to do with this mess, the ones who would panic if the owner suddenly appeared out of nowhere and started firing people. I thought about the contracts I had signed to keep my identity hidden precisely so I could avoid this kind of drama. Revealing myself now would feel like admitting defeat after 6 years of careful observation. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from an unknown number, but the message was unmistakable. "Heard you're on thin ice. Maybe it is time to update your resume before they do it for you." No name, no emoji, just cold warning. I stared at it until the screen went dark. Someone was leaking information outside the company now. The isolation was turning into something more dangerous. Monday morning brought the next escalation. I arrived early, only to find my access badge had been downgraded overnight. The security system let me into the building, but not the executive wing where the main servers were housed. When I asked the front desk about it, they shrugged and said it was per my boss's instructions. I spent the morning at my desk with read-only access, watching the team prepare for a major investor presentation without me. By 10 o'clock, my boss called me into his office. He was sitting behind his desk, looking every bit the confident leader, but I noticed the faint sweat on his forehead. "Violet, sit down," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to talk about your future here." I sat. The leather chair felt colder than usual. "I have been reviewing your file with Clara," he continued, leaning back. "The performance issues are piling up. Client feedback has been less than stellar lately, and quite frankly, the team is carrying you. I am giving you one last chance. Effective immediately, you will report directly to Stella on all remaining tasks. No more independent analysis. If you can prove yourself in the next 30 days, we will revisit this. If not..." He let the sentence hang, but we both knew what came next. Termination. The word was never spoken, but it filled the room like smoke. I met his eyes and felt something snap inside me. Not anger exactly, but a cold, clear resolve. "My boss," I said quietly, using the title for the first time in months, "this is not about my performance." He raised an eyebrow, the picture of innocence. "Careful, Violet. Accusations like that could be seen as insubordination." The threat was unmistakable. I stood up without another word and walked out, leaving his door open behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The private coercion had turned into something irreversible. They were building a case that would make any future reference from this company worthless. Mason found me in the parking garage at lunch, leaning against my car, because I could not face going back inside yet. "I just heard from Clara," he said, voice urgent. "My boss is pushing for a formal review board meeting next week. He wants you on a 30-day performance plan with daily check-ins. If you miss even one, it is automatic separation." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the genuine worry in his eyes. "Mason, there is something I have not told anyone here." Before I could say more, my phone rang. It was Clara. I answered on speaker so Mason could hear. "Violet, I need you back in the office right away," she said, her voice clipped. "My boss just received an email from the board chairman. There is going to be an emergency vote on restructuring the leadership team. Your name came up. You should probably be here when it happens." The line went dead. Mason and I stared at each other in the dim garage light. An emergency vote. My hidden ownership gave me the power to stop it, but revealing it now, in the middle of their manufactured crisis, would destroy any chance I had of walking away with dignity. The choice was closing in faster than I could breathe. I had 30 seconds to decide whether to walk back into that building as the invisible analyst or as the owner who had been betrayed by everyone she trusted. Either way, something was about to break, and I was not sure the company I had built would survive it. I took a deep breath and walked back into the building alone, my badge beeping weakly at the downgraded security gate. The emergency board meeting was already starting in the main conference room on the 10th floor. When I pushed open the door, every head turned. My boss sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his navy suit still perfect, a stack of reports in front of him like weapons. Stella was to his right, laptop open, looking every bit the rising star. Julian Aurora, Leo Violet, Scott Gregory Vance, and 2 other board members filled the seats, and Clara perched at the far end with her tablet ready to record every word. Mason slipped in behind me and took a seat near the back. My boss did not waste time. He leaned forward, voice smooth, but laced with that cold sarcasm I had come to hate. "Violet, glad you could join us. We were just reviewing the latest pipeline delays. Care to explain to the board why your section continues to be the bottleneck while the rest of the team delivers?" The room went quiet. Stella jumped in before I could speak, her tone dripping with false concern. "We have tried to help, really. But Violet seems resistant to any guidance. The data she handed over last month had errors that cost us weeks. It is like she is not even trying to keep up anymore." Julian nodded vigorously. "Exactly. And the client feedback from the regulators. They specifically asked why our analyst was missing from the last 3 calls. It reflects poorly on all of us." I felt the words like physical blows, each one sharper than the last. These were the same people I had quietly mentored through promotions and raises the ones whose bonuses I had approved without ever taking credit. Now they were painting me as the problem in front of the very board that answered to me through layers of holding companies. My hands clenched under the table, but I kept my face calm. Gregory Vance cleared his throat. David, you have documented all this? My boss smiled, thin and satisfied. Absolutely. Clara has the full performance file. At this point, we are recommending a formal separation package to avoid any further drag on the Oklahoma expansion. The board needs to vote on restructuring leadership today before the next investor call. A mini cliffhanger hung in the air as Clara slid printed reports to each member. I could see the numbers they had twisted every late night of mine reframed as incompetence. The tension thickened until I could barely breathe. This was the irreversible consequence they had been building toward the paper trail that would make me unemployable in the entire energy sector if I let it stand. I stood up slowly, heart hammering. Before you vote, there is something you all need to see. I connected my laptop to the screen at the front of the room, fingers steady, even though my stomach was in knots. The ownership documents appeared clear and undeniable. Majority stake through my holding company signed 6 years ago when I had scraped together every cent from my first drilling lease. The room gasped. My boss's face went pale for half a second before he recovered with a forced laugh. Violet, this is a joke, right? He said, voice tight. You expect us to believe you own this company? After 2 years of basic analyst work and constant mistakes, Stella leaned back, arms crossed. This has to be some kind of prank, or maybe desperation. My boss, do we need security? But the board members were scrolling through the files I had projected, murmuring among themselves. Gregory Vance looked stunned. These are legitimate. The signatures match the original acquisition records. For a moment, I felt the power shift the room, hanging on my next words. I had them. I could fire my boss on the spot, demote every single one of them, and reclaim what was mine. The suspense built as I opened my mouth to speak, but then my boss recovered his voice, cutting through like a blade. Even if this is true, and I doubt it is not some fabricated nonsense, it changes nothing about her performance. An owner who hides in the ranks and sabotages from within is a liability, not a leader. The board has fiduciary duty here. We cannot let personal delusions derail a multi-million-dollar expansion. The words landed hard. He was turning my secret into a weapon against me, framing it as instability. Aurora spoke up next, voice saccharine. If she really owned it, why let us carry her all this time? It makes no sense. This feels like a last-ditch attempt to avoid the consequences of her own failures. Leo and Violet Scott nodded in agreement, their faces a mix of shock and opportunistic glee. Julian added, the team has lost trust. Morale is in the toilet because of this. If she is the owner, then she has been lying to us for years. How do we even move forward? Clara shifted uncomfortably, but stayed silent, her tablet still recording. Mason tried to speak up in my defense, but my boss shut him down with a sharp look. Mason, this is not the time for personal loyalty. The company comes first. The board chairman, an older man I had only met once through video calls, cleared his throat. This is highly irregular. We will need legal to verify these documents immediately. In the meantime, to protect operations, I move we place leadership under temporary external oversight and suspend any ownership claims until verified. Vote hands went up around the table. My boss's allies outnumbered the few who hesitated. The vote passed in under a minute. My ownership was frozen, pending a full audit that could take months, during which my boss would remain in charge. The company I had built from one struggling lease into a regional powerhouse was slipping through my fingers, and the very people who had undermined me for years were now positioned to profit from the chaos. I stood there, the weight of every stolen idea, every whispered rumor, every demotion crashing down at once. I could fight it in court, drag this out for years, and maybe win back control, but the damage to the company would be catastrophic. Employees would lose jobs in the uncertainty. Contracts would stall. The expansion I had dreamed about would collapse under legal fees and bad press. Or I could walk away now, sign over my stake, at a loss to a neutral buyer the board trusted, and let the machine I had built keep running without me. The choice felt like a knife to the gut. I looked at my boss, his expression smug behind the mask of professionalism. He had won without firing a single shot. The team watched me, some with pity, most with relief that the problem was finally being handled. In the end, I chose the lesser evil. I signed the papers Clara prepared on the spot, transferring my controlling interest to a holding entity the board approved. It was a painful sacrifice, one that left me with far less than I had put in both financially and emotionally. I walked out of that boardroom with nothing but a severance check and the knowledge that my hidden success had cost me everything in the end. No dramatic revenge, no triumphant return, just the quiet defeat of realizing I had trusted the wrong people for too long, and now the company would go on without me, run by the very boss and coworkers who had made my life hell. Mason caught me in the hallway afterward, his face pale. "Violet, you did not have to do that. We could have fought it." I shook my head, voice barely above a whisper. It was the only way to keep the place from imploding. Some things you just have to let go, even if it breaks you. I packed my desk that afternoon, under the watchful eyes of security, the same team that had once greeted me every morning. Stella walked past without a word, but her smirk said it all. My boss did not even bother to come down. By 5 o'clock, I was in the parking garage again, this time, for the last time, the Tulsa sky turning orange above the buildings I no longer owned. The drive home was silent, except for the hum of the engine. I had learned the hard way that staying invisible to learn the business had left me vulnerable to the very authority I thought I controlled. The betrayal from my boss and the coworkers I had quietly supported cut deeper than any public firing ever could. In choosing to walk away, I saved the company, but lost the one thing I had built my entire adult life around. There was no victory here, only the heavy, lonely weight of a painful choice I would carry for years.